this time I think it was because we wanted to examine the country as a whole, and by the progression of the end of the last one, the kind of message as it deconstructs the like legend or myth or whatever is like, what happened to the dream, like where did the show go that we've all like built up, and so this one is after that, and there, the dream is dead. This is the funeral for the dream, and basically just kind of the bleak, what's like what remains after that is just bleak, we're fucked kind of feelings, and kind of examining a lot of the darker parts of the country's history and identity.
Hey, what's up, Vox and Hops heads? I'm Matt, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, brought to you by Sound Talent Media and Evergreen Podcasts, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians, talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. This Vox and Hops episode is presented by Heavy Montreal. Heavy Montreal are Montreal's premier metal promoter, and trust me when I say, if you are ever in Montreal and you are looking for a show to go to, well, Heavy Montreal will have you covered. They put on so many shows all year long, and they are all simply bangers. I am beyond stoked to have Heavy Montreal behind the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast. Now, before we jump into today's episode, I'd just like to ask you to follow the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast on the podcast platform of your choice. But more than that, I would love for you to tell a friend about the podcast. If there's someone in your life that just loves extreme metal, well, let them know that the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast exists. You can tell them that there are over 400 episodes where I sit down with some of the world's best metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you're to encourage one of your metalhead friends to become a brand new Vox and Hops head, that would be something that I would truly appreciate. Now, today on the podcast, I'm very stoked to be with Shane McCarthy of Wayfarer. Get ready, everyone. This is Vox and Hops episode number 429.
I warn you, what you are about to hear is very disturbing indeed.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Today I'm very stoked to be with Shane McCarthy of Wayfarer and like Cotton On. Shane, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Very good. It's Friday night. Your first single for this brand new Wayfarer album just dropped today, which is going to let people to know when we're having this chat if they're smart enough to dig back into the realms of release dates. It's Friday night. We're going to have a good time. Let's just jump straight into it. This is Vox and Hops. Vox and Hops is all about hanging out with my metal friends, talking about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. What beer do you have on your side that we're going to be sharing virtually tonight?
Well, at least first up, I have an Xtra Good, which is a light lager from Trve Brewing. I'm doing my best product placement right now. Also, it's much more free for me, and it's good. So
it's the best kind of beer, the free beer, and it's a good brewery, so it's okay. Sometimes you get the free beer and you're like, and then you still drink it, but it's not as much fun to showcase that you're drinking it.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if you've experienced this in your beer side of things, but definitely working at True, we do a lot of like things in the mixed culture sour realm and things like that. And that's great. They do a really incredible job with that program of our beers. But I feel like a lot of times people come to town, and if they bring like gift beers, they assume that we want like the craziest thing they possibly have because of what they've heard about this. And it's just like, man, half the stuff, I'm not going to drink this, man. But if you give me a Pilsner.
That's all brewers. That's all they want. They want Pilsners, or they want something crushable where they can enjoy a bunch of them and still continue functioning the next day and hypothetically late into night. On my side, I am drinking something, I think it might be actually the first or second time on the podcast I've had this brewery. It's a very, very cool brewery from here in Montreal. It's a Messorem Bracitorium. Metalheads opened this place up, I want to say 4 years ago. They're doing their 4th anniversary in a few days here. People from Ion Dissonance, from The Last Felony. Their taproom manager is Alex Ariane from Despised Icon. Orphans in Coma is Filion that used to be the vocalist of Orphans in Coma. He's the art guy behind this. All their can art is just amazing. This is an IPA. They do a lot of good stuff, but they started off with killer IPAs, and I felt like having one tonight, so why not? This is called Peut-être La Vie, which means it just might be life. It's an 8% double IPA with Nelson Sauvin and Motueka, smashing those New Zealand hops. Cool. I'm going to crack this, and I would love to hear about your very first beer, Shane. What's that first beer story?
The first beer I ever drank? I mean, it was a Coors Light stolen from my dad's fridge, which has to be the story for half the people that answer that question. Yeah, and what I would assume is also pretty consistent across a lot of these. I think I had to convince myself that I liked it for a while, and then within a short year or two, there was no more convincing necessary, and my path to delinquency was in full swing.
Well, at least it was a cold Coors Light, and the mountains were nice and blue, at least.
Oh yeah, those mountains were blue. You know, it was super cold. This is probably before they figured out that world-shattering technology with the cans, but
I know. Guilty. Also guilty there. Albeit my dad never drank, so I did not steal one from my father. I had to do it on my own. It wasn't a Coors Light, though. This is good. Crusher, they've mastered the high ABV, not too sweet, well-balanced double IPA games. Super juicy. Really nice color on it. It smells amazing. Talk to me about the evolution of your craft beer palate. At what point did beer become more than something just to get you inebriated? At what point did beer become a part of your life where you're going to work in a brewery? What is this story?
It really is all centered around Trve Brewing for me. You know, I enjoyed craft beer. I enjoyed certain things that I would have had before then, but it was more that I was drawn to the place because of the kind of, you know, metal communal aspect of it, especially like in Denver in the early 2010s when I was first of legal drinking age. There wasn't much in the way of like metal bars. I mean, I guess there's still not really now, but that was just kind of a place to congregate and like hear some good music and maybe run into some people who were into the same sort of stuff and people from other bands. And so it was kind of just going there because of that, and then learning about beer through being there and being like, oh, what's this? All right, I'll try that. And eventually, you know, becoming more interested in it by drinking a lot of it. And eventually, you know, just through, because I was already just bartending somewhere else in town, some normal kind of full service food and drink sort of place. And eventually I, you know, punished them enough to give me a job over there. And that's when I really started to learn more about beer. Although I admit, like, as far as the staff of the brewery, I'm still more the guy who's, you know, there on the end of the metal things more so than the beer things. But I enjoy learning about it, and I especially am, you know, proud to work for a place that I feel like, you know, Zach, the head brewer, and his team of back of house guys really do care, and they really take it seriously, and they really do something special. You know, there's a lot of acclaim for the beers, and I'm a little biased, but of course I think it's well earned, and I know the kind of care and passion that they put into it. So I respect that a lot. You know, even if I'm just there to pour it. You know, I just bartend and I put together events and shows and things for them. But I've learned what I have learned through them, and I have gained a lot of respect for it.
Hell yes. Trve Brewing is truly just incredible. The atmosphere, everything I've heard about it, it feels like home for a metalhead, but the beer is phenomenal. Every beer I've had from them has been just killer. Always like forward thinking, outside of the box. Huge shout out to Dave Whitty for introducing me to Zach, and then I had Zach on the podcast twice, but it's all because of Dave Whitty, which makes me very happy. The metal and beer god himself. So I'm excited to come and play Denver, and I Google searched it, and I was saying this before I pressed record over here. I'm an 8-minute walk from the HQ, I think it's called, the venue, to Trve Brewing, so I am definitely coming to hang out for sure. What is it about people and businesses not understanding and believing that embracing metalhead culture will be beneficial to them? Why are there not enough metal bars, and why is it when they are a metal bar that they tend to be filthy? When we don't necessarily need that to feel comfortable. We like clean things. We're tidy people, and in essence, you know, there's messy people in every subgenre. So why is metal not embraced the way that other subcultures are?
I think because that's a great question. And I think what comes to mind for me is that I imagine people just kind of assume that with it being, you know, the more extreme subgenre, and the fact that it is such a, you know, way of life thing for the people who like it. Like, you know, there's some people who casually enjoy metal, and that's
We're
cool.
all in.
But yeah, usually if you're into metal, you're into metal, and that's what you do, and it has infiltrated and shaped a lot of the pieces of your life. And so I think people probably assume or are a bit gun shy, just thinking that it's like, okay, well, if we open a metal bar, then only metalheads will come there, and like how many metalheads are in this town, and can that sustain a business? Which I think True is a great example of. Like, that's not the case at all.
No, because they've inspired so many other metal themed breweries and places even in Denver, and True is still doing well.
Yeah, and like, you know, I wish I could say that there was just enough droves of metalheads in Denver where, you know, we could sustain a business purely by serving, you know, heshers, like long hairs coming in every day. But that's just not the case. But like, that's the nice part is, you know, if you make a good enough product, it doesn't matter how you skin it. People will come for the product itself.
And then the beer geeks love the beer so much that they put up with the metal that's going on. And hypothetically, they might just, you know, become a metalhead or just put up with it.
Yeah. And then B, I think, you know, as long as you're not like an asshole about it, or at least too much of an asshole, you know, it's fun to draw lines sometimes just for the fuck of it. But with people coming in who aren't, you know, into that, then, you know, it's like it can be either where people don't mind being around it, or even where it's like fun for them. You know, it's like a tourism thing. Like, we're gonna go to True. I hear it's this metal bar, and it's just like, yeah, we welcome that too. You know, anybody can come in and hang out, and if it's not your thing, or you have a passing interest in it, or whatever, you know, it's just a place to hang out. And I think it's great to have something like that because, you know, it is a genre on the fringe. And for somebody who works there and also like plays in bands, it's great to, you know, like spread the word a bit. And maybe some people, like you said, will like hear something that is just like, oh, I thought metal was all this, and this, but then I heard something there that I actually kind of like, and it might send them down a path. So yeah, to circle back in a long-winded way to your original question, yeah, I think, you know, that would be my guess, that a lot of people are just like, oh, you know,
are there enough metalheads?
Just deal with metalheads, and then B, yeah, like I can't keep a business going with the, you know, 100 metalheads in this town, and really it's not like that. If you make a good product and make a environment that's welcoming, and you're like, yeah, this is what we do here, but it doesn't mean that you have to be 100% this person to be here. Like, you can just come and check it out and sit down, have a beer or two, and take it in. And if you like it, great.
I love that. When Messorem opened, because of their metal history, I went there, and one of the first things I saw from them was their mascot, their emblem here, which is very metal looking. And I went in, and they were playing like soft hip hop and stuff, and I was truly, I'll be honest, I was disappointed that I wasn't a metal bar.
Sure.
But they've done phenomenally well, and they know what they're doing. So they've taken that dark branding but stretched it over and opened to way more demographics, and it's obviously a good idea because they're killing it. But then there's a brewery here in Montreal, another one, a younger one that opened during the pandemic, which is actually inspired by Trve Brewing, called Peut-être, and I actually did my 40th birthday party there last Saturday, and thank you, that they are totally really into you guys, so I got my metal fill there. It's nice place, light crushable beers, extreme doom metal playing the whole night. It was very, very cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, especially hearing the light crushable beers probably means that they were paying attention to us, because that's another thing I like about True, and I think a lot of people assume, you know, with what they view the metal aesthetic as, they're like, oh, it's all going to be like 12% stouts and like crazy beat you over the head sort of shit. And like most of what we do is like sessionable 5-6% beers that, you know, are brewed with the intent of like, this is going to taste great, but you're going to like, you can sit down and have 3 or 4 and not ruin your entire day.
Exactly. Or next day. Well, maybe it's like been inspired by the European festival mindset, where like Wacken, Hellfest, all the beers that they have basically on tap are low ABV, so that the metalheads can go enjoy a bunch of them, but still not be too rowdy. Well, they can hypothetically get rowdy, but within means, and still enjoy their festival experience. But it is true that a lot of breweries, when we do collabs or we think about stuff like that, they always pitch the highest ABV, most ridiculous thing. And it's like, I don't want to drink that.
Really don't. Yeah, I mean, this thing, I want to say, let's see what this last batch, it is 4%. And that's why I'm starting here. I have another one on deck that's a whopping 6%. So I'm really going to ramp it up throughout the night. But.
See, and as I've learned over time is that I'll start my night. I used to do the opposite, and it was a mistake. I start my night now with a higher ABV, and I work my way down, so that my later night decisions won't affect me as much the next morning. But that just comes with maturity. Classic Vox and Hops question right here. I'd love to hear about the soundtrack of your youth when you were growing up in your parents' or guardians' house. What music was playing when you were not in control of the radio? What music did your parents or guardians listen to?
I mean, it was dad rock 24/7 for sure. Both my folks were into the blues as well, which I, at a young age, did not like at all. And honestly, it still
irks you.
At times, like certain types of it, like the roots of the genre are incredible, and it's the roots of rock and roll and all that. I think it's the kind of insistence on the structure that so many people who are blues for the sake of blues artists that will literally play the same endings to licks and things like that I'm just like, what? Why are we still doing that? How many times has this been recorded? But I have come around to a lot of it, musically, just not realizing, but embracing what I always knew was there, and just that this shaped everything. But other than that, it was all classic rock all the time, and that is great. I was down for some of it when I was young, and a lot of it now for sure. But my dad was a Black Sabbath guy for sure, a Blue Oyster Cult guy, and then Led Zeppelin and some lesser things. I'm not going to give him too many compliments on here. He did listen to the Eagles and shit, which that's his own fault. But a lot of good stuff. And he, as far as metal, I think, as far as he went was like Black Sabbath, and he had the Black Album, Metallica. That was his Metallica of choice.
Yeah, my dad too.
That's very
the generation, I think.
But to be fair, I have totally come around to the Black Album, as far as as recent as this last year, where I think it's if you just skip Enter Sandman because nobody ever needs to hear it again, whether it's a good song or not. They've heard it enough, and then you go from there, and it's just it's stadium power ballad, but still heavy and still Metallica. I don't know. I get it. I get it. The older I get, I'm like, oh yeah, I think now that I'm in my 30s, and I'm also
don't have to go that fast all the time.
That means I like this too. Yeah,
we can let some space happen in a song.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I keep poking Cryptopsy to do that, but they don't listen. It's always intense.
I don't know if you're going to enter the power ballad era of Cryptopsy or not. But I'm here for it. Yeah.
I don't think so. How about what would have been the first band that you brought into the house, much to the dismay of your parents, unless they were just embracing your passions and whatever you were into at an early age?
I mean, they were pretty supportive for sure. And I think the fact that my dad specifically grew up with rock and roll, and he, I don't know how much of this he wants to share, but I'm going to go for it anyway. He grew up, and I think he was 13 or 14, and his family, his folks converted to Mormonism.
Oh, wow. Okay,
and he was already old enough to be like, what the fuck? No, absolutely not. And so, he rebelled by listening to Alice Cooper and Black Sabbath and pissing off his parents that way. So I think, because of that, they were a little braced for when I started going down this road, they're yeah, well, of course this is going to happen. I've done this. And yeah, I mean, so I'm 31 years old, and I challenge most people of my age to tell a different story than this, because most everybody I know got in this way. But for me and everybody my age, it was fucking new metal that brought you there.
It was everywhere.
If you're paying attention to music for the first time, and it's the late 90s, early 2000s, you're not going to start with Dark Throne or something. You're going to start with Slipknot and Korn and Disturbed, and that's exactly how I fell into it. But through there, I quickly moved towards like Pantera, and I think that was my first like, okay, this is my shit right here, sort of moment. As far as the parents, I think, of course, getting into like a Slipknot phase at age like 11 or whatever, they're like, we'll see where this goes. You better not be a fucking juggalo.
It was very vulgar. It's something that shocked my parents, was the vulgarity of Slipknot. Because Corey Taylor, exactly, being so goddamn good, he's very articulate on those early records, and you can definitely understand what he's saying, despite the fact that he's screaming very intensely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. But I think they waited it out long enough, and it turned out not to be too. I didn't go down the worst possible road. Maybe not the best one either, but
well, the band was instrumental for a while until you started screaming. So.
yeah, for sure. But no, that would be the earliest days, and then Pantera led to Slayer, and then that eventually, and then it was starting to take guitar lessons, because I was the super bullheaded kid who like refused to take lessons when I started playing guitar. I just picked it up because I thought the cheapo Warlock at the CD store
looks real cool. Yeah,
and I saw School of Rock, and I was like that age, and I was like, yeah, I'll start a band, whatever. And my parents like, oh, you should like learn how to play it, take lessons. And I pushed against that until somebody like conned me into lessons by being like, yeah, I'll teach you these Pantera songs, but that means you have to learn this to be able to play that. And then eventually, I'm just, unbeknownst to me, learning guitar. But anyway, again, we're going off on a tangent, but I think it was taking guitar lessons, and my teacher, which was one guy who moved to Germany and then became Joey, who's now the other guitarist at Wayfarer, showed me a lot of the extreme metal stuff, and that's what accelerated finding all that kind of more underground stuff at a young age, was just having people older than me show me stuff.
I think that's so cool that you didn't want to take lessons because it wasn't cool. And then I think it's probably a different mindset maybe now with kids, because the lessons are everywhere. It's not like having to go to do a school. It was like an extra homework almost. Maybe that intimidated you. What was your relationship with school like? Was school something you enjoyed? Was guitar supposed to be like an escape from that?
Yeah, I think it was just like, school was fine. I did well enough in school, but I wasn't like particularly invested, except for maybe certain subjects. But I think it was just like in my young age, when you just have to take a music class as like a elementary schooler or something. I just never gravitated toward it, learning the recorder or doing like choir or whatever it was. Like as a kid, never cared about any of that. And so I just kind of assumed, like I saw the spiky shaped Warlock and I was like, cool, this is a metal thing. You're like, oh, take lessons. And my head just goes back to like elementary school music class. I'm like, what? No, don't ruin this. This
boring.
Is cool.
This is mine. Yeah.
Take me back in this bullshit. Yeah. But again, I got conned into eventually learning how to play guitar, and it worked out.
I like that. How about your first live music experience? Do you remember the first show that you went to go see?
Yeah, I do. That connects to what we were just talking about. The first show I ever went to was not Pantera, but it was Damage Plan, because that's what was around in 2004 when I was finally pushing to go to shows. Damage Plan, Shadows Fall, and The Haunted. It was the same tour that Dimebag Darrell got shot on. I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks before.
Damn, I played that venue.
The one in Ohio? Yeah, brutal. Is it still operational now?
I played it in 2017, so I don't know, but I do know there's like graffiti everywhere, and one of those places that's the hallowed ground just about.
Yeah, for sure. I would imagine so. I'd feel pretty weird being there, I think.
How about your first time on stage? Do you remember your first time performing in front of people?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first time performing at all would have been a middle school talent show. And it was just me playing like riffs that I wrote, really with like almost no structure. I think I was just going down there
straight
just,
to originals.
Around. Yeah. Again, the stubborn thing. I didn't learn many songs until later on. Still haven't actually learned that many other songs, but yeah, I think I just like messed around with the whatever I thought was a cool riff when I was 12 or 13, which was probably not that cool.
Wow, just you on stage with a guitar
Yeah. If by stage you mean the floor of a gym.
Exactly.
Yeah, with the warlock, as aforementioned warlock, and probably like a 212 combo amp, and just going for it.
Hell yes. Sitting or standing?
I think I was sitting. The whole thing is pretty weird and lame in hindsight, where it's just like, okay, I'm just gonna sit on this cheapo amp with my cheapo guitar and like mess around, basically. But when everyone else is 13, that's enough to like fool them, I guess. I don't know. I'm sure there's documentation of it somewhere, but I probably don't need to see it.
No, we don't want to see that. No, unless you maybe want to see it, but I wouldn't want to see myself do stuff like that from back in the day.
Yeah, fair.
What was your feeling like after that? Was it a sense of accomplishment? Did you think you killed, or was there a sense of dread?
I mean, it was a long time ago, but I think it. Yeah, like I said, everyone else is also 13, so like a kid going down there and playing metal at all was enough to be like, wow, amazing, great. So, I think it went fine. But yeah, it did take me a long time, not because of nervousness or whatever. I think I just got distracted through a lot of like high school after that, everybody I knew who was also like starting to play instruments and be into metal and all that, like formed bands and played in bands in high school. And I never actually did. I like technically me and the original founding guitarist of Wayfarer were playing stuff together in high school, and we even under the name Wayfarer,
really?
but we never got a full band together. Like we never got a drummer in high school. We just played guitars all the time and like tracked demos that were just guitars. But yeah, I never played an actual show until I was 18 or 19 was the first Wayfarer show. I think it was 19, maybe even 20, somewhere around there.
And it was with Wayfarer, which is crazy. I love this story, where your first basic show is now a successful band. I think that's interesting to look upon.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it wasn't necessarily by design. I didn't have this like.
Oh no, there's no plan that works. No.
Yeah. But I think it was that again, while my friends who were my age who were also playing stuff were like forming bands that just never came together on my end. Like, I guess I technically had one band before that, but we never played a show. But we had a handful of practices with guitar, bass, drums. So there was a death metal band called Fleshbound. I think I was 14. But yeah, a show never
sounds
came
like
together.
A name that would be popular now.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe I should resurrect.
Bring it back.
No, nobody needs that. I think I even remember the bass player, I think it was, who had played in some other bands, and he was like, "We should get on this battle of the bands," and I was like, "We fucking suck. We don't need to do that."
No one wants to see us do this.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think it was, like I wanted to form a band. I just like didn't, and we just played guitar instead, me and Tanner, the other guy. And, but through that, everybody else got to go and like learn the ups and downs and the what to do and what not to do. And so when Wayfarer formed, I was the only one, who hadn't like played shows, because the other guys had been like playing in bands since they were teenagers, playing at like little battle of the bands or this kind of showcase. So they like, were able to steer me in terms of, what to do and not to do. And for me, just like going and supporting the friends and going to this stuff, some of that's like, yeah, I don't ever want to do this. So like, but this looks cool,
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I got to skip some of it just by sitting on the sidelines while they figured out all the hard shit,
That's good. See, that's very good. It sounds like you were like cocooning and metamorphosizing into a better player throughout that time. And then when you came out of it, you just had to catch up.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know, maybe because, again, none of this was like by plan. It wasn't like, okay, I'm going to wait and watch and observe. It's just like I wanted to have a band. I just didn't.
Interesting.
But I watched my friends in bands, and then, yeah. And it's funny talking about like a better player. I think I was like at a technical level, I was probably the best guitarist I ever was at like age 16,
That's all you did.
Yeah, because it was exactly that. I was gonna say that's all I did, and I was like, only doing like not only I was doing a lot of stuff, but I was doing a lot of like Children of Bodom and Nevermore, and like really like shreddy technical stuff. And you listen to Wayfarer, it's not like that. And I think I later focused on songwriting more and definitely became a better like musician and songwriter. But as far as like playing ability, I was probably a better guitarist when I was 16 than I am now.
You think about all these kids that, I say kids, or young adults that spent their time in their bedroom instead of at parties or stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Dave from Revocation basically told me the same story, that he spent his youth in his room just becoming a better guitarist. But you get to have a lot of fun now because of those times.
Yeah, it all works out, you know.
Put the time in, people. It pays off. You're dropping American Gothic via Profound Lore here in the States, North America, Century Media in Europe, October 27th. It's an interesting, I've listened to a few tracks. I listened to the single that came out today. I liked the blurb in the bio that I received, that it's basically the funeral for the American dream. Let's start with that. Let's start with the concept behind it and expand upon that, because you should put that on a shirt. It's the funeral for the American dream. I think that's a good backprint.
Noted, for sure. Yeah, I think a lot of it is to do with kind of the trajectory of the last few albums. Like, you know, we don't necessarily make like concept albums in that, you know, typically when you hear concept album, it's like everything's like chapters in a story, and there's like, you know, some like linear progression that you can follow or something like that, which has never been true. But we definitely, they definitely all revolve around a big picture concept, you know, instead of like a direct like story. And I think, you know, each time we do a record, it's like after the process of writing it and releasing it and doing some shows, it's like comes in pretty clear already what we want to do the next time. And, you know, we've integrated the kind of Americana Western sounds, I mean, from the beginning in smaller ways, but definitely with the last now 3 albums, much more purposefully, I guess. And I think that's just because like the first album, you know, we were young, especially like I was young, and that was when I was doing a lot of the just writing by myself. And, you know, I think you just become so much of a better player with the people around you. But
we also like, sorry to cut you off, but too, when you're creating something for the first time, you have to sort of like build the foundations. And then once you build the foundations and you know that this is what this band's entity is, you can structure up outside of the framework that you've built. And then lean more into things that you feel more comfortable with, and you see what connects with fans when you're performing and through reviews. It's an interesting thing, but that first framework that you've built is like the trunk of a tree, basically. And then everything that grows out of it can grow into different directions, but the framework, it all comes from that framework. Yeah, no, I think that 100% applies. And like, you know, the first record, I think it sounds a lot like the things we were into, you know, and it's just like that sort of thing. And because at the time we were doing all this, definitely myself and some of the other guys were really into a lot of this Denver sound stuff, like Woven Hand, 16 horsepower, all this stuff that's like, you know, to me, the defining music of Colorado, and just love those artists and, you know, the kind of super unique thing they've carved out and like made part of the identity here. But I think starting out, I was like, okay, I like that stuff, but I'm in a metal band, I can't do that, you know. And it eventually just started to like creep in naturally. And it was somewhere in the process of the second album, and then definitely going into the third, that we were like, no, we're just gonna like do both and integrate it. It's who we are, you know. This is our identity. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, to kind of circle back to your actual question, I think, you know, each of the albums since we've like really embraced that path has kind of like circled around one particular thing. Like the World's Blood album was kind of the haunted land, you know, grappling with growing up in a haunted land, kind of in the wake of a genocide and the formation of the country. And then A Romance with Violence kind of looks at the West as how it's viewed and interpreted by the world at large, and how it's like portrayed and like mythologized, basically, you know, romanticized, like it is in the title. And so that's almost from the perspective of like looking at it all as like this big like dance or film or something like that. And I think, you know, with this coming around to this album, we wanted to zoom out even further and
examine the idea of the country as a whole, and just through writing, through coming up with the concepts and writing the lyrics and all that sort of stuff. Really, it's just like concepts first. Like to me, it feels like the lyrics write themselves, because when we go into a song, even instrumentally, it's like already about something. Like we're like,
really?
Okay, this is going to be this kind of story. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, wow.
Like we
so that's cool.
That way. We're like, every album for the last three, the album title has been decided before there's like one riff written, and like we know like what sort of realm we're trying to explore. And this time I think it was because we wanted to examine the country as a whole, and by the progression of the end of the last one, the kind of message as it deconstructs the like legend or myth or whatever is like, what happened to the dream, like where did the show go that we've all like built up. And so this one is after that, and the dream is dead. This is the funeral for the dream, and basically just kind of the bleak, what's, like what remains after that is just bleak, we're fucked kind of feelings, and kind of examining a lot of the darker parts of the country's history and identity, but still in a broad stroke, like feeling of it kind of way, not a retelling of historical events,
not a historical
kind of way,
accurate depiction. How do you mentally cope going so dark? Is it something that you can do where you come up with these concepts, and especially this one being so dark is the word that comes back to my mind, and then you writing about it and creating and painting the feelings and the colors and the music, how does that affect you mentally?
I don't know. I think the music is a cathartic way to explore things like that, for sure. So I imagine that's something to do with it. And also I think a lot of it just comes down to like in daily life, just being like a realist. Like, I'm not a outwardly negative person, by nature. I like to smile and have a good time and like, see value in things. But at the same time, it's like the world is fucking insane, and it's like impossible to deny everything that's insane about it. And reading through history, as well as just existing day to day and hearing about everything that's happening and seeing things happen and whatever, there's no avoiding it. So, I think exploring all this stuff about the United States and the West and all that, it's because it's an area of my interest. Like I grew up watching Western films. My granddad used to have a ranch on the western slope of Colorado where we'd go for a week or two every summer and like ride horses, shoot guns, go roping. And then we'd just like watch John Wayne movies, because that's who he was and what he did. And I think that planted a seed of just like, I love that stuff. And later, as I got really deep into being just a movie nerd, going down the path of like watching the Italian Westerns and then all the like American Westerns, like the classic ones, to then like the 60s, 70s kind of like darker American Westerns. I love that shit. But a lot of that, some of it is like glorifying and built to entertain and like paint a certain picture. But a lot of it, especially the ones that I like, were the ones that are examining the brutal aspects of it and, not shying away from that, especially, those kind of 60s, 70s, like new Hollywood takes on the Western were all pretty grim, when it came down to it. And that's where like this album came from. So it's like, I love all that stuff, but like, there's no getting around the nature of what it is. So, we're going to explore it. And like, that's always going to be the conclusion, is that it's fucked up. There's no getting around that. So I don't know. I think it's just a realism, and that's why it's an exploration, not an oh woe was me, of like we're fucked, everybody give up. It's not a DSBM album, it's not telling everyone to kill themselves because the world has no hope. It's just like, well, let's dive in and explore what this is and what this means, and just kind of live in this headspace and see what comes out.
Talk to me about the production of this. You worked with Arthur Rizek, correct? Classic, legendary producer. Talk to me about working with Arthur. Talk to me about that experience. He's a legend,
Yeah, that was fucking awesome. He's definitely the man. Yeah, it came together pretty naturally. You know, I mean, from the onset, we were having a discussion. You know, we feel like we've like been around the block a few times with the last couple albums, and that we could just like, you know, to our own perception for what we wanted out of the band, we felt like we were really close going into this, or basically we're at the point where we're like, okay, we're gonna make like one of, if not the record that is like what the band is. You know, we could like feel it coming up, and so we're like, okay, we got to do this right. We've worked with some great people in the past, but like we know we want to do certain things differently this time. So like, who is the guy to do it? And I think that, you know, the beginning of the thought process, at least on my end, was like, oh, maybe we should turn to like a real household name of, you know, the bands that we grew up loving. Like everybody in Wayfarer is a big fan of the old or like middle era Opeth stuff, right? So we're like, oh, what if we try to work with like a Jens Bogren type dude or something? But then it kind of, you think about it and just come to the conclusion that, you know, and it's not to throw any shade on what any engineer producer of that type is doing, but a lot of these people that like built their name, you know, a couple decades ago, you know, they just may not be as invested in each project now because they don't have hungry. To be, you know. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Where it's like they're always going to be skilled and competent and like deliver a good product, but like what made those records special that we love were like they were
beyond and above because they were so eager to make something amazing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's what put them at the top of their game. And you know, I feel like you can never totally see something like that until it's in hindsight. But in thinking about who that might be today, it was like Arthur's the only name that kept coming up, because we're just like, okay, here's this guy that you know, he plays in these like heavy metal bands, which are like, to me, as far as the contemporary world of you know, bands that are playing like heavy metal stuff, they're like the bands. Like Eternal Champion and Summerlands are like the bands, and then there's everyone else, you know. And then you have like Power Trip, which, you know, I remember the whole kind of thrash revival thing of 10, 15 years ago. And like those bands were fun, and like I liked them, but it was not necessarily my thing, the kind of like high top, you know, party thrash sort of vibe. Whereas Power Trip seemed to have this like piss and venom that none of those other bands had. And I think a lot of that was in the production of it, where it's just like, this is fucking metal. It's not just like, you know, a party tune. It's like something about it is like truly fucking ripping. But then, you know, even the fact that he has done stuff that isn't stuff I, you know, gravitate towards or listen to, but bands like Code Orange or things like Ghostman or this other stuff that he's done just kind of illustrated that he's like got a crazy range. And
that's something that you guys need for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
To hit all the mark.
Definitely, because that was the other thought process. Like, oh, should we go with somebody who's made like some of these like Woven Hand records or something, who really gets that side of things? But it's like, well, you know, if the metal parts don't punch like they should, then the album is dead, you know. And like, maybe someday we'll do a just Americana album and we can think about that. But yeah. So like, okay, even though there's no direct example of like, oh, Arthur did this band, they're like us, we should work with him. Just like he seems to be able to handle a lot of things, and he seems to rise to the occasion and you know, make the things sound like they're supposed to, or like they want to, or that they could at their highest potential. And then, you know, I think what sealed the deal was meeting him, and that he is like he's a no ego guy, a no, you know, and not a fake humble guy either, because that's almost worse when you meet somebody who like knows what the deal is about them, but they're just like, oh, you know, that's just my little project there, and like it's bullshit. But he's a truly like down to earth guy, and you know, I don't know, I felt right away like, it's just like, cool, this is just a fucking guy who plays in bands, who wants bands to sound good when it's, you know, his responsibility to make them sound good. So we talked at Fire on the Mountains when Eternal Champion and Wayfarer played, and it was like a 5-minute conversation where he's like, yeah, cool, we'll do that. And then
that was it.
Yeah. And it was fucking awesome, man. He's like, this was, I think, the first time we like really solicited like producer advice, you know, beyond just like mixing sort of things.
Compositionally, is that what you mean?
A few times compositionally. We came in with the compositions pretty well ironed out, but there were a couple things that we intentionally left open, because we like to fuck around in the studio and sometimes like just, make little tweaks there. And then also to see what he might have to say, and definitely like vocally working. Actually, that single that just came out, False Constellation, that was one that, I actually tracked all those clean vocals in a separate session. We did the whole album instrumentally and almost all of the harsh vocals in like a 2-week stay in Philly. And then we went to Europe and toured for a month. And then like 10 days after that, I went back to Philly for just a couple days to do all the clean singing parts. And a lot of that was just because the way our schedule was with the other bands and whatnot. I knew when we were leading up to the record that those weren't where I wanted them to be yet. So I was like, okay, well, let's just do everything else and give me a couple weeks to like focus on writing these fucking vocal parts. Because much like we're talking about with the metal production, like clean vocals, it better work. Like if you do them and they suck, then your album sucks. That's just like what happens.
I have a history with that, but
hey, it's probably not as bad as you think.
It's not. I'm teasing. No. But it is a tough thing. Is that something that you've had to come to terms with, doing harsh and clean vocals live? Is it something that you struggle with, hypothetically, to perform the clean vocals as great as you'd like them to be because of the harsh vocals?
It's pretty new to me. Like we started integrating it at all a little bit on World's Blood, but that was one song that was completely clean the whole time, and we never played that song live.
Exactly.
And then on Romance, we did include more of the clean vocals, but this was released in 2020, so there was like
minimal
a year
touring,
and a half until we played it all. And so it was really this last like tour cycle that we did at the end of last year, and then the European tour this year, that I really even had to do it. And I was super fucking nervous about it, and there were probably times where it didn't go that well, but overall, it was good. And I felt like doing it on tour helped me, get the confidence to like
absolutely
really fully
lean
embrace
more
it
into it for the new record. Yeah.
Yeah. And to circle back to the thing with Arthur, that was one of the things that, I had almost every song like where it was going to be with the vocal patterns and whatnot, but False Constellation, the what I would call like the chorus parts, was the one part that I was like, I don't know if I like this. It was just like, that was like the last thing I was working on. And it's just like, we really liked how the song came out. It's different than a lot of the rest of the album. It's much more stripped down and whatnot. And I felt like the chorus was really important because of that. And so I think I was really overthinking what I was doing. And that was one that I got in there and like tracked everything else, and it went fairly smoothly. And then when it came to that song, I told Arthur straight up, I was just like, I have this chorus, but I think I hate it. And like, I need you to tell me what you think about it and what we can do with it.
Is this dog shit, or can we do something different?
Yeah. And we just like dove right in, man. And he had, I could tell he like thought about it a lot. And I don't know, was like understanding of what we wanted out of it, what I wanted of it, and also like what I was most afraid of, going wrong with it. And so that was like a perfect example of something that would not have come together the way it did without working with Arthur. Also, guitar wise, that dude is a master with tones, because that's something that I've always been like plug and play guitar gober, like gear idiot. Like I'm not one of those people to like obsess over my setup and stuff. And it's just like, really, I just don't think about it much. Like I don't think about it as much as I should. But I've never been that stoked on the way my guitar sound is, just because, again, I kind of just like get one thing and stick with it for a long time. And so this is the first time, working with somebody who's like a guitar player and really, really great with the tones, that I've ever been fully satisfied with the guitar tone too. Because he just like, we got in there, he had all his amps, we tested a bunch of shit, and it was pretty clear what needed to happen there. So, yeah,
maybe it's going to end up being like the rabbit hole that you just fell down. The way you fell down the craft beer hole, hypothetically, this album, working with Arthur, is going to be that for guitar tone.
Yeah, maybe I'll be a gear snob guy.
Maybe,
next.
You never know. Collabs. I love making beer collabs. I've made probably 80 of them in the past 4 years with the podcast. I've made a bunch for Cryptopsy. love doing it. I think it's so much fun to see my logo on something. You guys made a beer with War Pigs at the Metal and Beer Fest in Denver back in December. Talk to me about that experience. Have you done it before? Talk to me about that one, and specifically, what was that beer?
But yeah, again, just being overly inundated in the craft beer world with people bringing bottles of insane juice bomb, dessert bomb, whatever the fuck, 15% apocalyptic beverages. Just like, okay, can we just make something good that you can drink a lot of? And funnily enough, they first came back and were like, oh, we want to do a Keller Pils, which was ironic to me because like the best-selling beer, at least at the taproom of True, is the cold Keller Pils. And so in my head, I was like, oh, Zach is going to like, there's no way he's not going to have thoughts about this if he tries it. But then they eventually kind of pivoted towards like a hoppy Pils, or like a hoppy take on a Keller Pils. So it was something different. And it was really good. The tragedy of the whole thing is it was not canned. And I think they brought out a few kegs, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but a couple of them were like fucked up, and I think they were only able to pour like one keg of it. So I was able to have because this was the day that we were playing at the festival. And so they came around at first like, hey, have this. And I was like, cool, I'll have a little bit, but we have to like play. Yeah. And I think by the time it was over, there was only like, I think I had a total of like 2 of these beers, which was a bummer. And there was no can. So it was like, this Wayfarer beer that lived for all of like 5 hours. But
it happened.
What I had was great. So it tasted great.
It can happen again. It can happen again, which is the important part. Shane, I have one last question for you, a classic Vox and Hops wrap-up question. It probably doesn't happen to you very often because you enjoy light ABV lagers, crushers, but every once in a while it happens to everyone. Hypothetically, on October 28th, when you're celebrating the launch of this new record, American Gothic, what is your hangover cure?
Ooh, hangover cure. Breakfast burritos, 100%. Potatoes and green chili will stop any, cure any ails, I think, especially
if you've had too many ails.
Hey, yeah, for sure. Yeah, probably a Gator light or 2 wouldn't hurt, but breakfast burrito, green chili, potatoes. Live and die by it.
Shane, thank you so much for taking the time, hanging out with me, talking about your life, talking about music, talking about craft beer. I hope you're there when I come through late September. I'll let you know after we finish this chat. I'll go do a search and I'll let you know what day. But until then, this was really cool, and massive cheers to you. And everyone go check out that new record. It's going to drop shortly.
Well, yeah, thanks for taking the time. Cheers.
Hey, thank you all so much for listening right to the end. You know that I love and appreciate that. Man, this was an awesome conversation. So stoked that I connected with Shane. What an awesome, interesting approach to writing extreme music they have. This westerny, weird, doomy metal is so goddamn captivating. If you have not checked out Wayfarer and have checked out some of the singles from American Gothic that's coming out, you definitely should. It's definitely going to be one of those albums that's going to hit the top 10 list this year. I think they got something interesting going on. The concept is amazing, and I can't wait to see them live. Hopefully they come up here soon. Shane, thank you so much for sitting down with me and having a chat. I greatly appreciate it. Now, if you enjoyed this Vox and Hops episode, you should sign up to the Vox and Hops Total Podcast mailing list. You can do that on my website, voxandhops.com. That's VOXANDHOPS.com. And when you do that, you shall receive 1 email a week that contains all of the details of everything that has happened recently in the world of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast. You'll get to see which episodes I dropped recently. You'll get to see which episodes I have coming up. You will also get to hear about any projects I have in the works before I announce them to the public. You will also get to hear about anything going on in the world of Cryptopsy, and there's a lot of stuff going on with Cryptopsy right now, so the mailing list will keep you up to date on that. You will also get to see which albums the Vox and Hops album review crew have reviewed recently, and you will get to see which albums Jerry Monk, Vox and Hops' metal architect, has added to the Brutal Awakenings playlist. If ever you're looking for new music to listen to, well, you should listen to the new Cryptopsy as Gomorrah Burns. Just kidding, but you should listen to it. Apart from that release, Jerry finds the best new releases and puts them all onto the Brutal Awakenings playlist for our listening pleasure. So check it out. It's available on both Apple Music and Spotify. There's always a lot of stuff going on in the world of the Vox and Hospital podcast, and I hate when you miss a single thing, so please do me a favor and sign up to the mailing list. The Vox and Hops Metal Podcast is brought to you by Sound Talent Media and Evergreen Podcasts. I hope you have a killer rest of the week. I will be back next week with one episode on Tuesday with Travis Ziegler of Weird Leatherworks and Meadery. But until then, remember to enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. Cheers, Vox and Hops heads.